The views expressed, opinions given, and any communication made between the hosts and guests of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Para X Radio, EMC Network, or all services that play this show. The hosts and services are not responsible for the actions of their guests, and the original rights of all intellectual property is retained by the creator, and all work is used with either permission or Creative Commons license. The show is for entertainment purposes only.
When reason sleeps, that is the time of monsters.
Phil, can you believe Halloween is a week away?
It's really coming up too quick.
It really did.
I felt like, I remember when I put up my Halloween decorations initially, well, at least started to do some of them, people were like, "Oh, there's so much time left." I'm like, "No, there isn't." It was like end of September.
Right.
I was like, that's going to go really fast. And I put so many up that if I put them up in like mid-October, it's pointless. It's
right.
That time's going to go so quick. I want to have time to enjoy them.
So you got them up in September.
End of September, yeah.
And we had the Halloween party on Sunday.
That's right.
And you came up for some chili.
It was great.
My pumpkin cheesecake.
Yes, everything you made was delicious.
You like the pumpkin cheesecake?
Loved it.
Yeah. Allison's criticizing it.
She's criticizing.
She wants me to reach higher heights. In my cooking.
in your culinary endeavors, right?
She's found me. She's grooming me for a lifetime of culinary delight.
She's like, it was good, but let's up the game a little bit. Right?
Yeah, she said it wasn't cooked enough, so I gotta...
Really? I thought it was whatever.
First time.
I thought it was okay. It was your first time doing it, and that was really good for your first time.
First time wasn't bad. And I did the pumpkin chocolate chip cookies.
Oh, they were good.
Yeah, I like those.
Any more of those?
The cupcakes are good. I'll send you home with some.
The cookies?
Yeah.
You have cookies still?
Yes, I do.
Oh, they were good.
I made a bunch.
I had quite a few of those. They were good.
Those were, yeah. Well, it's episode 101. We have a special extended episode for Halloween. We've got 2 hours tonight.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
It's our first episode after our 100th.
Yeah, and then 102 will be our second episode
after our 100th.
The Science of Monsters. And it's going to be a great show. Not only do we have Dean Howarth, who's going to be talking about the science of monsters on episode 101, but Michael Garrett and I finally got our act together, got a script written, and tonight it premieres on our Halloween special, Fluffy and Pete Survive the Zombie Apocalypse. Are you excited, Michael?
Hey, zombies, it's me, your boy, Michael.
It's like your little
Yeah, it's gonna be my trademark from now on. Hopefully that show doesn't sue me or something.
I've got it saved, and I've been using it, so I don't think they can see you because it's a pretty common. But anyway,
sure. But to answer the question, no, I'm very excited. Fluffy and Pete is something that you and I have been talking about for a while, bouncing ideas back and forth, and as you say, we've finally gotten our act together because it's like a radio play. Get it?
I get it. I get it.
It's very clever. I'm a very clever person.
He is indeed. That's why I chose to write the script with him.
Yeah. Don't flatter me. You're doing all the heavy lifting here. I'm just the pretty face that we slap on the billboards.
Yes, you are, and I think we'll be sharing the heavy lifting over time. But It's going to be an awesome episode. What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show, episode 101, The Science of Monsters. Yeah. We've got a fun guest on tonight.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. It's coming up next week.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so it's kind of our Halloween special.
I would like to say, unfortunately, it is, but I'm looking forward to it too. But it's not so much the day; it's the season.
You know, we were going to get down to Lancaster this weekend. Mm-hmm. And I've got a nor'easter coming.
I've heard. Yeah.
Our first nor'easter of 2018.
Yeah, I heard. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
They're talking snow. They're talking rain. So we might go Sunday up there.
I didn't know about the snow. Jeez.
Yeah, so it's coming. Episode 101, The Science of Monsters, on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show, on Parax Radio on Friday nights at 9 p.m., following Spirited History, and on all major podcast services. So we got a guy on tonight. His name is Dean Howarth.
Dean Howarth is a veteran physics teacher and a living historian who recreates episodes in the history of science using a large repertoire of replica scientific devices, specimens, and demonstrations. His website is livinghistoriesofscience.com.
The moniker natural philosopher has been used by men of science since the Renaissance. Although Dean, the natural philosopher, now specializes in 18th century discoveries, the history of science extends further back and further forward. Mr. Howarth uses an extensive collection of replica scientific apparatus to conduct period-accurate demonstrations similar to what one would see at a meeting of scientific society or in a discussion with fellow men of science like good old Ben Franklin and Tom Jefferson.
That would be a cool meeting I'd like to sit on. You know, that'd be pretty neat, right? And Mr. Howarth has worked extensively with museums and historic sites. These institutions provide a valuable connection with our heritage. He's made pilgrimages to scientific sites around the globe, and these experiences have enriched his narratives. Mr. Howarth's goal is not to show how the past was different from today. Instead, it is to show how the past remains relevant to the future. The foundations of modern science and science education are found in the works of great natural philosophers of the past.
So he's going to be in Philadelphia on October 30th, 2018, and he's going to be doing a great event over there at the Science History Institute. It's down in Old City near Independence Hall.
Right.
And it's going to be vampire and werewolf legends that actually they have origins in historic fact. And there was once a real Victor Frankenstein seeking to animate the dead, and actual grave robbers terrifying the public. Living history performers Dean Howarth and Rachel O'Connor will explore the science behind classic horror tales through macabre stories and demonstrations.
Did you know I have my degree in grave digging?
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, you've been holding out on me,
I know,
my friend.
I never mentioned it.
We've been to so many graveyards, we could have made a little money on the side.
Yeah.
We have plenty of dabbers that are being sent for anatomizing and dissection, but I mean...
Let's do it.
But check them out on Tuesday, October 30th, 2018, from 7 to 8:30 over at the Science History Institute. It's on Chestnut Street in Philadelphia. How are you?
Very good. Pleased to be here.
We're talking about Dracula, we're talking about Frankenstein, we're talking about zombies, we're talking about werewolves.
Fluffy and Pete survived the zombie apocalypse. Fluffy and Pete.
Number 12 on BeatSpot's Top 30 Horror Podcast.
The dead demand to be heard, and on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show, Philadelphia's horror home, we listen.
New, true ghost stories every episode. Interviews with paranormal investigators. There is no supernatural.
The natural world is just far greater than we can perceive. More information and expanded content at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com.
And follow us on Twitter at PFWhatAfraidOf. Find us on all major podcast services including iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify, iHeartRadio, or listen to us Fridays at 9 p.m. on the Parax Radio Network.
I'm horror author T. Fox Dunham.
I'm horror author and filmmaker Phil Thomas.
So what are you afraid of?
If you like what you hear, leave us a review on your preferred podcast service.
What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. Speak to the Dead.
This Halloween.
Para X.
I started from my sleep with a horror. A cold dew covered my forehead. My teeth chattered, and every limb became convulsed, when, by the dim and yellow light of the moon, as it forced its way through the window shutters, I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I created. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaw opened, and he muttered some inarticulate sounds, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. He might have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out, seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed down the stairs. I took refuge in the courtyard belonging to the house which I inhabited, where I remained during the rest of the night, walking up and down in the greatest agitation, listening attentively, catching and fearing each sound as if it were to announce the approach of the demoniacal corpse to which I had so miserably given life. Frankenstein, by Mary Shelley. This is something I know something about, being a medical historian. And so in the 19th century, advances in medicine and science upset the European belief system in divine rule over life and death. Galvani zapped amphibian legs into spasm, giving credence to the idea that the right kind of jolt could reanimate the dead. And the apostles of Galvanism claimed it was the vitality of life. Then his nephew, Giovanni Aldani, tried to bring to life hung criminals. He succeeded in opening the eye, making the leg move of George Forrester, who was a murderer of his wife and family. Now, Mary Shelley mentions Galvanism, the introduction of the book that would come to be called Frankenstein. How was science upsetting concepts of life and death in Europe at the time of Frankenstein's publication?
If you look at the time period, I mean, we're sort of like, this is the teeth of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment's kicked in, and now we're at the beginning of the 19th century. And if you look a little bit back further into the middle of the 1700s, you know, who are the pillars of the Enlightenment? You have Voltaire, you have, people like Thomas Jefferson, John Locke, and Diderot comes to mind, the guy who wrote the Encyclopédie, where they wanted to take all the knowledge of the day and make sure that everyone could share it. And if I'm not mistaken, one of his quotes was something like, the motto of the Enlightenment was "Sapere aude." My Latin's not very good, but it was "dare to know," which was really sort of that audacious approach to that Enlightenment era. And I think that encapsulates that notion of challenging everything. It was a time where people didn't just say, "Oh, it is written and thus it shall be believed." We're in the golden age of science. I mean, Isaac Newton and the likes at the Royal Society are saying things like, "It doesn't mean anything unless you could do it in a laboratory." Nullius in verba, I think, was their motto. So this idea that everything should be challenged, I think the constructs of life and death and how it is written about and considered fall into that, because you have to remember that, you know, life and death had a very ritualistic protocol associated with them since antiquity, right? And that was, you know, sort of put forward and maintained by the likes of the church. And you know, if you were to pick your average Enlightenment thinker and you're thinking like, you know, who do they really want to kind of like stick it to? You know, it's organized religion. So I think that that spirit of the Enlightenment is kind of just carrying over into this life and death is the area where science shall not wander, and science is saying like, oh yeah, so, you know, let's have at it. And I think that has a lot to do with this sort of sense of challenging these sacred things of life and death.
Wow. Yeah.
Did you ever see either one of you? Twice Told Tales?
What is it?
It's called Twice Told Tales. It's
No,
Nathaniel
what's that?
Hawthorne. It's a collection of Nathaniel Hawthorne stories that were. It's an anthology done by Vincent Price back in the '60s.
Okay.
The first segment I actually watched last night. I watched the whole movie, but the first segment is this woman who dies 38 years prior, and Vincent Price and his best friend Carl are talking on the eve of his 79th birthday, and they're speaking of his wife. Carl's wife, who died the day of their wedding, and she's been in a crypt outside of his house ever since for 38 years. And they go out. He wants to put this dead rose that he had pressed in a book on top of her coffin.
Okay.
And the coffin is like slightly open, and there's this water dripping down. And when they open it fully, she's completely preserved.
Oh wow!
And they bring her into the house and they inject her with this fluid, and she rises from the dead. And she thinks it's the same day, but 38 years has passed.
It's like Herbert West.
Yeah. And they drink it. They drink it and they become young because they're old, but they're made up to be old, and then they look like they're due when they're like 40.
Wow.
You know?
So Nathaniel Hawthorne. So no red letters.
No. There was no scarlet letter there. No, not that one. But
listening to him, I was thinking about what I know about the period and how Americans don't understand this, but there was a time when religion was sewn into the fabric of society. And, I mean, of course, many religious wars happened between Europe, Spain, France, and England. And so the concept, I mean, even physicians back in the 16th century, they weren't allowed to make a medical breakthrough without saying, God had thought it first, or God did this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is breakthrough stuff, and I'm sure this was very upsetting.
Sure, and just that notion, like the new motto that, man is the measure of all things, as opposed to these things are hallowed and shall not be questioned. And that's all being torn down from the late 1600s through the 1700s, and I think, by the time that the 1800 rolls around, that's the cusp of modernity, and I think that those sort of those ideals have now been put sort of on the back burner. I mean, and some of the scientific minds and philosophers of the day, it's almost treated as though it's sort of like, oh, how charming to think about things that, like, you can't think about this. Well, you just watch me. And, from a science teacher's perspective, that audacity is echoed in I don't know how many different stories of, great scientists making great challenges. So it's naturally something that I find a sort of a natural attraction to.
And the pendulum swings.
And Dean, how did Frankenstein contribute to this whole debate?
Yeah, I don't know if it contributed to it. I think it's more of like it reflected it. And there are some people who their opinion about Frankenstein, and I don't know if I'm in the minority or the majority on this point, but is a commentary on science itself. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I mean, I personally think that Mary Shelley's book is a commentary on parenting and kindness and gentleness of the human condition, and what happens when an innocent monster is denied that. And she had a distant father. Her mother died soon after she was born, so there's some issues there with the way she feels about her parents, and I think that is reflected in the book. Now, she uses science as the mirror the personal story is reflected in, and that's a sign of the times, because I think that science gave people the audacity to think such thoughts. And, I don't think Mary Shelley is writing Frankenstein to further that or to say it's good or bad. I think she's a product of this time, and that makes Frankenstein a perfect reflection. So if you want to get a feel for what's going on in that time period, that's the book. Whatever was going on in her mind, I think really perfectly reflects it.
We've got a time period when we did not have much control over life and death. A lot of people died young. A lot of people died from drinking the water. You get cancer, you were dead. They were still letting blood up until the American Civil War.
I know, it's
and
insane.
Even then, after that, they were still using calomel. They were treating things with mercury. So were there any other stories and myths that upset the concepts of life and death around that period, around that cusp?
I think I'd be able to address that better if I were an English teacher or a lit major. But, but reflecting on it a little bit, I think you probably have a little bit of that in Bram Stoker's Dracula, let's say, which is near the end of the century, but it has a kernel that set it off. It was catalyzed literally when in Mary Shelley's time, because the guy who brought back the vampire story was John Polidori, and he was hanging out with Mary Shelley on that weekend in Lake Geneva when they had decided to have a ghostwriting contest. And I think Dracula even encapsulates more of the sort of, it's this heady scientific time, and Van Helsing is kind of representing that, and sure, maybe there's some deeper aspects of good and evil in that story, but I think you see that there, or in H.G. Wells' Time Machine. What's the ultimate way of saying you don't have to worry about life or death anymore? It's like, well, I can travel through time, and how I'm going to do it? With science. And, and that opens up all these new and wondrous sort of ethical and philosophical issues. So just from that perspective, there are famous science fiction or the like, but, I bet that even if you went into that question later and I was more in my wheelhouse and I was looking along the lines of, were scientific tomes of the day along those lines, and like a science book might not be written on how to defy life or what have you, but the science books of the day, ever since the time of Isaac Newton, this notion was that we should delve into nature and find these inalienable axioms that apply everywhere, forever, no matter what. And again, I think that flies in that face of the sort of religious approach to these unanswerable questions, which was, well, maybe there's some questions that aren't worth answering, or, you're not supposed to answer, or not even supposed to ask. And I think science, the great scientists of the 19th century, your Michael Faradays and Humphrey Davies and Charles Darwins and all those guys, they're daring to look into nature for these secrets. And you know what they're not looking into for the most part? They're not looking into the Bible. Maybe that is another manifestation. Sure, they're not authors, but hey, if you look up the greatest books in history list, I bet you'll find Origin of Species on there. So maybe there is something to that.
Yes, she walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. Lord Byron was there.
Oh, yes.
And they had a pretty open idea of monogamy. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, no. I tend to think that there could be a TV show on sort of like MTV on Mary Shelley, Byron, and Percy Shelley, and all their sort of antics. I think they were rather the free love movement hippie cult of the time. So I'm not sure I would want my daughter to run off with Percy Shelley or Lord Byron, but nonetheless, hey, it made for some good stories. So
yeah, it was extremely scandalous at that time.
Yes, it was.
Oh, sure it was. Yeah.
Well, even Charles Dickens had some.
Yeah.
Some things on the side there. In your living history, you legally recreate the experiments of the era. How did you research these demonstrations, and what devices do you use to carry them out?
Well, interestingly, and this is one of the cool things, when I started even just as a teacher, it was always kind of exciting to be like right near Washington, D.C., and I have this wonderful storehouse of information called the Smithsonian that's right around the corner. And whereas most of my fellow teachers and the school were sort of like, well, don't take the kids out of class when they could be studying for their tests or practicing for their SATs or what have you, I was always the one who was saying, like, well, can't I bring them from class and we can go on a field trip and go see something for real that they'd actually remember? I mean, let's go look at the lunar lander when we're talking about of gravity, or let's go downtown and see this collection, or go to the Library of Congress. And that led me to developing these connections with these resources downtown. And my favorite one of all is the Dibner Library of Science and Technology, which is this huge collection of scientific manuscripts that go all the way back to, I think their oldest one goes back to 1300 and something. But I sort of made friends with the people at the Dibner Library, and when I was teaching these things, they said, like, well, we can pull these books. We can pull Isaac Newton's first edition of the Principia, or we can pull Benjamin Franklin's Experiments on Electricity, and you can, bring the kids down and they can see the book and turn the pages, and there's something like a thrill to seeing the real deal like that when you're looking at a book by, Luigi Galvani or something along those lines. And that led me to having the ability to look up firsthand in primary source material, and not even just primary source material like you would find online or in a textbook, but opening the pages of Giovanni Aldini's note to see what experiments he was doing and flipping through them and unfurling the diagrams themselves. That sort of had this little secret clubhouse to go to and learn some of these things and really envelop myself in the history of it. And maybe I'm a big nerd or something, but when you're holding the book in your hand, and it really does kind of give you chills a little bit when you're interfacing with history that close. And that's what sort of led me to figure out how I could demonstrate these principles. And a lot of the stuff you use in a high school physics lab today, an electrostatic generator, let's say, uses some of the same principles. I mean, sure, all the things with computers and stuff are pretty far removed from what was going on in Ben Franklin's day, but a lot of it isn't. And a lot of these scientists were doing things in their laboratories that a rank amateur would do. Like, we remember, like, our grandparents who were, I remember my grandfather was just a tinkerer, and he, put things together down in his basement and build things, and that's what Ben Franklin was. I mean, he slapped together things and made machines that would generate sparks. So I took it upon myself to see if I could recreate some of those things. And although I am not a master craftsman, you can do just enough to turn, let's say, a typical classroom demonstration piece of equipment into something that looks a little old-timey. And like I said, it might not be perfect. And there's a guy in Philadelphia. He's an old machinist, and he makes museum pieces for the Ben Franklin Museum there, and they're just stunning. And I can't do that. But then again, I'll just stand 20 feet away from everybody and from where you're sitting, it looks perfect, because it's not so much the machinery itself that's the issue. You can always go to a museum and see that. Just using it to teach the science, and that's what comes first and foremost. Sort of, begged, borrowed, stealed, tinkered, disguised, and any number of things to try to just come up with a way to make the science be a little bit more alive than it would be if you just read it from a textbook.
Do you believe that scientists will be able to reanimate the dead one day? And if so, how?
Well, it's kind of interesting. We already do, when you think about it. Defibrillators that you take off the wall, and there's an emergency first aid station, they bring people back from the dead, and they do so exactly the way Giovanni Aldini or Benjamin Franklin would have done it. They just sort of supply a spark and get your heart to beat again.
Right.
The trick is, can you wait a couple days and then bring them back?
No. I just watched Flatliners the other night.
Yeah.
They can't be gone too long. They kept pushing the envelope.
6 minutes,
5
brain
minutes,
damage, and then,
6 minutes, yeah.
But I was watching something today about zombies, and they were talking about a couple of kids who have gone into a kind of suspended animation, and they were able to bring them back a few days later.
Oh, wow.
Of course, they were from different countries with not a very documented scientific curriculum. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Especially people who've been brought down to lower temperatures and come back.
Yeah, right. I think, we're getting closer and closer to suspended animation. NASA and DARPA are studying this so we can send people into space and, put them in the big nap until we wake them up on the other end. So considering the fact that, and you just spoke that even as late as recently as the middle of the 1800s, we were still treating just about every illness with either bloodletting or a laxative. We've come a long way since the middle of the 1800s. It's been more than exponential. It's about, between you and me, it's about time medicine kind of caught up, right?
And yet, I've been to seeing doctors the last few days to deal with my medication issues and the thyroid issue and post-oncological. And do you know what they prescribe for me? Bloodletting and blood tests and laxatives.
Really?
Yeah, right. They call them emetics or something right back then. It's like, it's a nice word for,
For vomiting up your guts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are talking to Dean Howarth on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show on Parax Radio on Friday nights at 9 p.m. It's our Halloween show, episode 101, The Science of Monsters. And we got a little ghost story that a friend of mine, an author, decided to start messing around with EVPs over in Ceylon, and he caught a very scary voice talking to him. And he wrote this up for us and sent us the EVP. So we'll play this now. This is read by David Walton, our English folk singer. Right. And this is my experience with the other side. A ghost story from Tim McLean with EVP on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. And we will be back with wonderful living history performer and teacher Dean Howarth on What Are You Afraid of?
Experiences with the Other Side. Written by Tim McLean. Read by David Walton for What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. Cyprus, 2018. Please keep listening for the completed EVP played at the end of this story. You would face a near impossible struggle if you were to make an attempt at finding a more skeptical person than me when it comes to the supernatural. I don't believe in ghosts. That's what makes my experience all the more intriguing and perhaps makes me a fool for sticking to my position. A few weeks ago, I responded to a comment in a Facebook group run by one of my favourite philosophers, Tim Freak. One of my fellow fans was asking if Freak's latest work, Soul Story, includes any discussion on spirits, because he had just had a seemingly miraculous conversation about the nature of life with an invisible entity. I was interested and asked how this had come about. This is when I was told about the Ghost radio app available for Android and Apple devices. The person recommended I check out his YouTube video to see the evidence for myself, so I did. I wasn't convinced. He asked some questions and he got some responses, but I found it hard to understand and I wasn't sure that the responses matched his questions in any meaningful way. The next step was to check out the app myself. After reading a handful of reviews, I decided that there might be something to this after all. Aside from a few users who had said they didn't get any type of response, everyone was certain that they had managed to make contact with something. I just had to try this myself. The app isn't free, so I paid a few euros and downloaded it. I tried it out straight away, copying a few of the phrases I'd heard the other person say in the YouTube video. I wanted to treat this absolutely seriously. If there really were spirits waiting to talk to me, then I didn't want to give them any reason to believe that I wasn't being genuine. No one wants to talk to a douchebag, I figured. If anyone good-natured would like to make contact, please make yourself known, I said. Nothing. Hello, I'm here if you would like to make contact. Still nothing. The conversation stayed one-sided and fruitless for just over 4 minutes before I gave up. What a load of crap, I thought. I'd been scammed out of 2 or 3 euros. But at least I was proven right once again about the non-existence of the supernatural. The app slipped from my mind completely in the next few days until I accidentally swiped across my smartphone and saw the shortcut on my screen. I decided to give it another go. After about 3 minutes, the indicator showed that an entity was present. I spoke to it, still completely genuine, asking what it would like to say. I got a response but couldn't decipher its crackled mumble. It sounded like 1 short word or 2 short ones, but other than that, I had no clue. I asked for it to repeat whatever it wanted to say to me. The response I got was interesting. 1 short, clear word came through. Die. I asked why it had said that, and the answer I got this time was, amazing. A few more questions revealed nothing of any great interest to me. They were seemingly random words without any connections to my questions or to each other. In all fairness, I spent most of my time asking the entity to repeat its previous word, so it was perhaps frustration on the entity's part that resulted in its farewell response of, bastard. Needless to say, this did nothing to convince me about the reality of spirits. I was sure that the responses were random, but I tried the app several more times, regardless of my findings. If the replies were random, then I was eager to prove it. If they were genuine, then I was eager to prove that too. Transcripts and recordings of everything I experienced from then until now will be made available as soon as I have some time to dedicate to it. For now, I would like to focus on the 2 latest and most interesting experiences. I was getting a little tired of using the app now. I figured that I had nothing to lose and changed my attitude when I asked my questions. If the entity wanted to communicate, then it would have to convince me that it was real. So I asked for proof. Could you give me the name of a number, please? You can give any number you like, either by speaking or making any kind of sound, I said. No response. I want you to prove that you're real. Please give me the name of any number. I was trying to sound earnest, but I think my skepticism was coming through. A strange echo came through my device, and then 7. Okay, I thought, this is new. I sat up. 7. Okay, I believe you now. I believe that you're here. Is there anything I can help you with? Do you have a message? Recording. That's right, I said. I'm recording your responses. I will have it analysed to the best of my ability. I struggled to understand most of what came next, but at one point the EMF reading dropped dramatically and the entity said, "weakened." Soon after that, it was gone. This left me questioning myself. I knew I had to try at least one more time. A couple of days later, I had my opportunity to try again. The account of this next session is by far the most bizarre experience I have ever had in my life. It is this that is making me question my position of skepticism. I went into this session with increased skepticism, figuring that I had just gotten coincidental responses last time. I decided to test the entity further by asking only very direct questions. Here is the transcript. Me. Hello? Would you like to communicate? Answer. Indecipherable. Me. I'm here if you would like to communicate. Answer. Talk. Me. If you can understand me, please say the name of a number. Answer. 8. Me. Okay, can you see me? Answer. Indecipherable. Me, holding up both hands, fingers outstretched. How many fingers am I holding up? Answer. 10. Me, where are you? Answer. Here. Then the signal was gone. I was freaking out and listened back to the conversation to see if I could work out the indecipherable stuff, only to find that, at around 4 minutes in, the exact time the entity presence was recorded on my device, the audio went completely silent. The static sound that hangs in the background of every recording only returned after the entity's presence was no longer detected. None of the conversation exists, and I know that people will think I'm making it up, but I'm not. I asked direct questions and I got very direct answers. The fact that it counted my fingers is the absolute most amazing part. Could that have been a random response? I don't think it could. Now, after discussing this with Fox from the What Are You Afraid Of podcast, I feel a little apprehensive about trying to make contact again. He rightly pointed out that this is the only time the entity has undoubtedly communicated directly with me, and this is the only time that the recording has been corrupted. I believe that if there was an entity present, which I am struggling to argue against, then it somehow manipulated the device just so that I couldn't share the experience. I think it must have been deliberately messing with me. It is just too convenient that the recording went completely silent during our exchange, only to return to static after the entity disappeared. Fox seems to agree, and has cautioned me about continuing down this track, and warned against becoming too preoccupied with seeking proof. The show will play the complete EVP file at the end of this ghost story. What do you think of this experience? Would an encounter like this cure you of your skepticism? How would you proceed?
EVP.
Welcome. Could I ask you to prove that you're real? That you're real? Could you give me the name of a number, please? Indicate any number you like, either by speaking or making any other kind of sound. Could you give me the name of a number, please?
Mercy, a new horror medical thriller from author T. Fox Dunham, published by Bloodbound Books. Based on the author's horrific battle with a rare form of lymphoma that involved intense chemotherapy and radiation, Fox turns the horror of his experience into terror on the page.
William Saint is dying of cancer. On most days, death seems like a humane alternative to the treatment. Stricken with fever, William is rushed to Mercy, notorious as a place to send the sickest of the poor and uninsured to be forgotten, and finds the hospital in even worse condition than his previous visit.
Willie's memories faded. He grabbed his sack head, the sack head of the scarecrow, picking at the exposed chicken wire to hold them in. However, the memories fell out of the holes in his face. They wormed and crawled from the leather flesh and the old clothing of the scarecrow, then squirmed and wiggled down his body.
The grounds are unkempt, the foundation is cracking, and like the wild mushrooms sprouting from the fissures of decay around it, something is growing inside the hospital. Something dark.
Fangoria gives Mercy 3.5 out of 4 skulls. Dunham has channeled his many brushes with the other side into the exquisitely rendered, lyrical, supernatural hospital thriller Mercy.
It's feeding on the sickness and sustaining itself on the staff, changing them, and now it wants Willie.
Come now, Mr. Saint. Just a little more of that sweet milk. So salty and so good. You won't miss it. And we ever do so like our delicacies here at Mercy Hospital.
Part medical horror, part supernatural suspense, Mercy is a hard-hitting fever dream of a novel. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Tim Wagner, author of The Way of All Flesh and Eat the Night. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere in both print and digital versions.
Life is an addiction.
Let go. Let it all burn.
Well, here we are again. I thought that perhaps the nightmare was over, but no. I am summoned once again and can only obey. I am in thrall of Fox and unable to resist his powers, his hypnotic powers, masquerading as charm and friendship, his transatlantic, perhaps global powers. And so, every Sunday morning I sit in front of a microphone and read. Every Sunday afternoon I edit the audio file I have been commanded to create. Every Sunday evening I press send on an email to Philadelphia with an MP3 attached and tremble as I await the verdict of my master. I changed my name from David Walton to Brendan Shawland and created music which I liberally sprinkled throughout the internet in websites including SoundCloud and Bandcamp in a pathetic attempt to throw him off the scent. Those hopeless breadcrumbs are still available if you care to listen, so that you will know what not to do when your time comes. That's right. It didn't work. He tracked me down, and I am once again his creature. If you are listening to this, you are in grave danger, and I can only urge you to flee. Flee! Before it is too late, before you find that you too are a voice actor on whatayouafraidof.com.
Explore the darkness.
Find out what goes bump in the night. Did you hear that?
Did you see that? What's that bright light in the sky? Oh, we so need to investigate.
Calling all witches and sensitives.
Explore the paranormal.
With host
Shauna
and Vicky
from Geeks Paranormal.
Wednesdays
at 9 Eastern,
8 Central.
Let's explore. On paraxradio.com.
I was to raise my eyelids, but looked out and saw perfectly under the lashes. The girl went on her knees and bent over me, simply gloating. There was a deliberate voluptuousness which was both thrilling and repulsive, and as she arched her neck, she actually licked her lips like an animal. Lower and lower her head went, as the lips went below the range of my mouth and chin, and seemed about to fasten on my throat. I closed my eyes in a languorous ecstasy and waited with beating heart. Bram Stoker's Dracula. So we're back with Dean, and this is a wonderful show. I'm really enjoying this.
This is great.
Yeah, thanks. Me too.
Diving into some personal stuff here. And we've been talking about reanimating the dead. And of course, I've been watching all my zombie films. We're kind of moving on from Frankenstein or the modern day Prometheus. It actually went through several variations over the years, after she wrote it. This was in a time when the novel was in its infant form and they were still working it out from the journal entry into the modern fiction narrative we have now. I remember we had Laurie Michelle on last year. She was talking about Mary Shelley, who was one of her idols, Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing. So, moving on to another monster in popular horror lore, the vampire. Where did the vampire myth come from? What were some of the scientific facts that were misinterpreted that led to the myth of vampires?
Well, it's kind of cool, and the fact that we're just talking, it's a perfect segue from Frankenstein into the vampire, because as I mentioned, John Polidori, a sort of failed doctor who was essentially Lord Byron's guy who gave him his opium, probably, was in on the ghostwriting contest, and he essentially, out of that, brought back his version of the vampire, which was sort of like a dapper sort of, the vampire we think of when we think of Count Dracula kind of came from this, and I personally believe that that version of Dracula and the vampire actually came from a caricature of Lord Byron, but I don't want to go down a rabbit hole that I'm not qualified to comment on, but the vampire story goes way back to the Middle Ages, and it seems to come from the Balkan countries where there was like something called the Umpir, and that even can be traced back to folklore in the Caucasus and Turkey of something known as an ubir, which was a sort of like an undead witch kind of a creature. But the one in Balkan history was, this wasn't a dapper, suave-looking vampire with a nice tuxedo. It was kind of like just some like monster who ran around in the woods and ate human flesh and was caked in mud, and just sort of just more of a feral, more like the wolfman or the vampire than he was the vampire of more modern times. So that was, thanks to Polidori, he repackaged this into, an admixture of creature that lives off of others. It comes out at the night it rises from the grave, and add a little dash of, how should we say, the debonair of Lord Byron, and you have a whole new repackaging. And, although Polidori's story didn't really take off, Bram Stoker, I'm sure, knew about it, and he sort of like crossed the T's and dotted the I's and took it to a whole new level of this idea of the vampire that we have today. But these notions go way back, and the notion of it, the creature that lives off of blood. Well, blood's always been in sort of like these folkloric stories that go back, not even just folklore, even in religious stories, the value of blood as being the life essence of things. It's sort of natural that if you want to have something prey on something, what's the worst thing that you could have stolen from you? Well, maybe it's your blood. And I think that was a natural byproduct of what, once Stoker's Dracula comes along, we have this very, very visceral attachment. Anybody who's got a beating heart is a little bit afraid of someone sort of like using your jugular vein as refreshment.
Yeah. Kind of like jugging the Kool-Aid.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So where the book that became Frankenstein expressed myths of death and reanimation, Dracula and vampire myths explored ideas of disease and sickness such as tuberculosis, which of course was a popular subject of Edgar Allan Poe. Could you elaborate?
Around the 1790s, and this is, might have been in the idea in the head of Polidori and certainly in Stoker later, the 1790s, and it had happened earlier sort of in the Renaissance, but the most recent vampire scares that were going around in Europe and even in New England in the United States, people out of the blue just started saying, like, you know what, there was someone who died over at the Smith farm, and they buried him, and then everybody else got sick and died too. And they all looked gaunt and pale, and they, bleeding when they coughed. You know what? it might just be that whoever the Grandpa Smith, he must have turned into a vampire and he's been feeding off all of his family members. So it's clearly a vampire because it's not a reasonable story, but it's a story. And if you went back to 1790s and said, oh, there are airborne germs that you can't see that could get inside your lungs and cause you this illness and make you waste away and die, you could make the argument that those invisible germs or pathogens, that could be pretty fantastical for your average person. So when the tuberculosis scares came through, a lot of people just reached back into the depths of their mind and tried to find a way to make sense of it. And the way they made sense of it was, vampire stories. As early as, and even into probably right at the cusp of that 1800, there were still people who were, all of a sudden, hey, what did we used to do with vampires? Well, back in the old country, we'd go find their grave, dig it up, tear out their heart, burn it in a crossroads, take their skeleton, nail it into the coffin upside down and rebury it, or any number of crazy prescribed ways of stopping vampires. But it was sort of like just a little bit of a story. When people are scared, they grasp for things, and I think that had a lot to do with it. They were encountering these illnesses, and you could make cases. And a real scientist who were talking about the vampire hunters would claim that you know what? When we open the lid of the casket, you referenced this earlier with your story, that their skin looked pretty young and translucent, and they looked like they had fangs. And anatomist or mortician would say, the skin starts to decompose and remove from the lower layers of the dermis, and it looks clear, so it would look whiter. The gums would recede, so that's the reason why fangs would happen. And when they say, when we hammered a stake into its chest, groan came out. Your mortician would say, you just squeezed decomposition gases out of their thorax, and it made their vocal cords vibrate. So you could go through and give these scientific explanations, but if they are falling upon ears of people who aren't really wise in the ways of science, they might say, yeah, egghead, it's a vampire, and we got him. So, when reason sleeps, that is the time of monsters, as the quote goes.
That's the time of monsters. I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Vampires getting far too much love, to the detriment of other groups of undead. Those elitist bastards skulking in their castles, sleeping in their velvet cushioned coffins, shunning daylight in the mansions like they had something to hide. They're so not cool. Vampires suck, but zombies rule. You might think they're both just living corpses, but that's not quite true. In fact, there is a crucial difference. Zombies have great numbers, but vampires a few.
Caliburn Press, LLC is a Madison, Wisconsin-based publishing company owned and operated by Alan Ledden. Caliburn works with talented writers, artists, editors, and marketers throughout the United States, and you can find their books through their many imprints that include Damnation Books, Eternal Press, Malaferia Press, Ciento Sordida Publishing, and Spiro Publishing. Please visit their website at sites.google.com/site/Caliburn Press LLC/home, or Google Caliburn Press to check out their growing list of titles on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and any other place fine books are sold.
What are you afraid of?
Hi, I'm Tim Wagner, Bram Stoker award-winning author.
Hashtag Grave Girls. This is Katrina Weidman of Destination America's Paranormal Lockdown.
This is Jim Chambers. I'm the author of The Engines of Sacrifice.
This is Jasper Barr, award-winning author of The Final Cut.
And you're listening to What Are You Afraid Of?
What Are You Afraid Of?
To What Are You Afraid Of?
What are you afraid of?
Love it. Fantoxic, please. Fantoxic.
You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. Yeah, it's a mouthful. For more great shows, visit electronicmediacollective.com.
One time Sigmund and Sinfolti came to a house where two men were asleep under a spell. A wolf skin hung over each man, which could be shed only every 10th day. Sigmund and Sinfolti put on the skins, and they could not get them off. Now they howled like wolves and ran off into the forest, killing many men. One time they quarreled with each other, and Sigmund bit his friend in the windpipe, nearly killing him. Then a raven, perhaps sent by Odin, flew by with a leaf, which Sigmund applied to his friend's wounds, bringing him back to full health. From the Saga of the Volsungs, 13th century Icelandic prose. So we're talking about vampires, and by the way, Bill Gill, our dear friend Bill, is going to love this episode.
Yes, he is.
Because we finally get into vampires, we finally get into werewolves.
He's excited about that. He likes us. He likes this stuff.
He loves our episodes.
Yeah, he does.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. That's why I keep telling people we're number 12.
Yeah, we're number 12
on BuzzFeed's best horror podcast out of thousands.
12 with a bullet, as they say, rising up.
12 with a silver bullet.
There you go.
Absolutely.
So moving on from vampires, and I wish we could. We'll do an episode on vampires one day.
We
We're
should,
like 10. Yeah. But we mustn't forget werewolves as the last member of the popular horror movie creature trifecta. Yeah, in 1521, a Pierre Bourgault and Michael Berdone were executed as werewolves. They are now believed to have been a serial killer team. And in 1573, Gilles Garnier was executed as a werewolf. He was another serial killer. So if Frankenstein symbolizes death, Dracula symbolized disease, did werewolves represent like the serial killer brutal murder?
I've taken a few psych classes in my life, but if that doesn't sound like the perfect explanation to me, I don't know what does. Because it really, like when you look at some of these stories and the ones you've mentioned, I remember there was another guy, I think he was in Germany, whose name was Peter Stube or something. And when you read his affidavits when they were putting him on trial, if those words were coming out of the mouth of a straggly-haired guy in California with a swastika carved on his head, you'd say like, oh my God, yeah, serial killer, just like Charles Manson. That, to me, I think it's just another attempt at trying to make something horrific, something alien, something frightening, and trying to put an explanation on it. And perhaps this predates all of the things that we've been talking about, vampires, Frankenstein, and all of that. It just goes all the way back to the most basal beliefs that, well, if you don't understand it, let's just call it evil. You have a glass of evil, and like, oh, now I'm infected, or, where does it lurk when you find it? The way it is written in sort of like the Christian canon or religious perspective, these are just the dark things that go on in people's minds. If you don't believe that a werewolf could have just been, a crazy lunatic who tore his clothes off and lived in the woods, turn on TV and switch to, scroll down the channels and read about serial killer this, serial killer that. For as long as there has been humanity, there have just been crazy people who want to kill somebody else. And I think that, the werewolf is a perfect example. And, why did they pick wolves? Yeah, who knows? Because wolves were scary and they were an immediate threat to people at the time. Today we pick things like a banker with a nail gun. Because you know what? We know about bankers with a nail gun. I think the werewolf one it's pretty easy to dissect in terms of what's going on. Now, does it make it any less fascinating? No. Any less scary? No. It's still pretty cool. And as long as that happens, and as long as people do bad things to each other, which I think will pretty much be. We're looking like we're going to do it forever. I think we're going to have these boogeymen like werewolves.
So, transforming into animals or shape changing is an old cherished belief for many native cultures, including the ancient Celts and Native Americans, coming from most societies that practice shamanism. Even the original shape changer was changed by Jupiter for serving human meat. Do you believe these pagan sources motivated Western culture to associate lycantherapy with evil?
Yeah, sure. That's an easy one. And also, if you're thinking, all right, well, you know what? I need an alibi because I just got pegged for, chopping up 6 people. I got it. Hey, you know what? I was visited by the Dark One, and he made a bargain with me that he would turn me into a wolf. So it's not my fault. Wolves eat people. Sorry. So there's all kinds of stories about, changing forms and that sort of thing, and that echoed into the time we were talking about earlier, Mary Shelley's era, the 18th century, and when they were trying to do things or actually it was prior to that, when they were trying to revive the notion of blood transfusions. So in the late 1600s, when the gentleman who figured out which way your veins flow, when they were studying how blood circulation works, and Vesalius is doing all his things on cadavers and that kind of thing, they thought that, maybe we can transfuse blood from person to person. So they started doing blood transfusions between animals and people. And it's they picked a famous example. There was a guy in Paris. They said, we have this raving lunatic who runs around the streets. He's mad. He bites people. So let's transfuse him with lamb blood. And then lamb is the gentlest of creatures. And they were trying to do these experiments to see if they literally changing the blood could change the person. And the Queen of Sweden actually heard about these things, and she said, don't sign me up for transfusions because I don't want to turn into anything else. And
somehow doesn't sound like a regular idea.
And that's very much symbolic of the empirical thinking of the time. I think of the walnut, and the walnut was considered good for headaches and brain problems. So it's shaped like a brain. It was all empirical thinking. It was not the time where they scientifically measured things. They just looked at something and associated it.
There's not much proof for anything that they imagined.
No, and this all changed finally with the microscope with Louis Pasteur. And that happened
pretty
in the
amazing.
20th century.
There was one cool story. Samuel Pepys, the essayist, he said something like, maybe we can get Quakers and Catholics to stop fighting if they would just transfuse their blood, and then everybody would just get along. So,
I worship as a Quaker. Are you haunted by shadow people in the middle of the night?
Do you secretly love all things creepy and spooky, enjoying ghost stories and horror fiction from the best storytellers?
Do you have a true ghost experience you want to share, but no one will believe you?
If yes, listen to the professionals on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror Paranormal Show, Friday nights at 9 p.m. on Para X Radio and at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com.
What Are You Afraid Of on Para X?
Our creepy and demented hosts are on call to provide you with all your spooky needs with true ghost stories, interviews, indie music, and new horror fiction. We are ready to scare you.
Para X.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you, Barbara.
From Night of the Living Dead by George Romero. On to our favorite monster from a scientific point of view, and here it is, our favorite. The zombie. Could a zombie apocalypse really happen?
The way it depends on your approach to what the zombies are. So, if you're the sort of, I'm getting a little tired of the Walking Dead zombies. Okay, fine, but give me the 28 day later zombies, and it's hey, That wasn't just the dead rising in the classic sense and these rotting corpses with their guts falling out just because it kind of looks gross on TV. That was sort of like a blood-borne pathogen that unleashed rage. Yeah, rage virus. And
right.
yeah, and that's
like
exactly
rabies.
the point I was going to make. Like rabies for humans, and well, I guess humans can get rabies too. But that idea, I mean, sure, something like that could happen, or you can have someone who's they're so. Whatever adrenaline is coursing through them, and have this rage virus, and you could put 12 bullets in them, and they still keep moving, and that would seem as though they wouldn't die. I don't think that's beyond the pale of reason in terms of the way we understand how a pathogen might work, affect the human body, and these epidemics and how they could spread. Sure, they usually end up in killing you, but sometimes they don't. What if it's a parasite? You have these parasites that get into creatures like, what do they call it? Toxoplasmosis, right? Yeah, that kind of example. And it's like, hey, I'm going to make this creature do what I want. I'm going to make this mouse wander out in front of a cat in daylight. Cat gets eaten, and the cat leaves its droppings, and that's how the germ spreads. It's not a big stretch of the imagination to think that something like that you would tend to think of, zombies, how trite. Something like that, I think, is out of all of the examples that we've been talking about, might be most feasible.
I was watching a movie earlier called The Girl with All the Gifts on Amazon Prime, and it was about just that. The fungus that infects the carpenter ants that drives them to the sun had gotten into people from dogs, and it's actually a very good movie. And I was watching another one about a fish out in the Pacific Ocean that gets a bacteria in its head, and it drives it to get eaten by birds, which then pass on.
Right. There's something so much more insidiously creepy about that than like, there's a Frankenstein sneaking up behind me, or maybe there's it's a full moon, there's a werewolf. That the wedding of the invisible pathogen and just the insidious genius that is evolutionary biology is really super creepy.
And how do we know that wasn't a part of our evolution?
Right. Yeah, we don't.
So Phil's going to ask you a question, but this is about the undead zombie.
Yes. How would a zombie still function?
See, like, I don't think it would. So, the guy who wrote World War Z, and they were when all the zombie books came out, and they said the human body needs a circulatory system. It needs electrochemical reactions moving through the nerves, and if it's just like if you have no roads in your town, the cars can't go anywhere. So, could something like microbial live in that function where you didn't have to have a sort of infrastructure of life? Yeah, maybe on that level, but it's the reason why I think that our typical zombie, the rotting flesh zombie that you see so often, from a scientific perspective, I just don't think that one's happening.
Yeah, I don't see
I agree with him.
Yeah, I agree too.
I have this conversation with my wife Allison. We're often in the car runs.
We all have conversations about zombies with our wives, right?
We do. Actually, we kind of do. I just don't believe that the undead zombie could happen because the human body is a machine.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and
it has to work.
It needs oxygen. Yeah. It needs blood. It needs food. And it couldn't rot and survive.
No.
Agree with you there. We're talking to Dean Howarth. Now, Michael Garrett and I, who was on the Fort Mifflin episode, have been working on a script called Fluffy and Pete Survived the Zombie Apocalypse. And tomorrow we're recording the parts, and it's going to be a fun little audio zombie sketch show about two complete losers who somehow survived the zombie apocalypse, and they're the best of buddies during it. Oh, and God's living in their basement.
God's living in their basement?
Yeah, he came down for the apocalypse and found out no one was there. So he just went to live in their basement. He hangs out with them and teaches them lessons.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
He and I will be recording it tomorrow. I think we're going to attach it to episode 101, The Science of Monsters. But thank you so much for talking to us. And to let our listeners know, you are going to be at the Science History Institute on Tuesday, October 30th, 2018, from 7 p.m. to 8:30. Again, that's 2018 for everybody listening in the future.
Yeah, your future listeners.
That's over in Old City, Philadelphia, by New American Revolutionary War Museum, over in 315 Chestnut Street. And we're going to have information up about you at our website at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com. We have lots of our previous episodes up there, all of them actually. Lots of ghost stories, articles. I just did that Writing the Modern Ghost Story, which is getting a lot of readers now. I'm getting a lot of retweets on that. Great. And plus ghost stories.
Thanks for the opportunity, and if people come out on Tuesday, Maybe George Forster will be there too.
Oh, because he's been brought back.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Yes, so he's been brought back, but
well, good luck with that too.
He has him in a case somewhere.
Wait. I'm not going to give away any secrets, but perhaps we'll have a special guest appearance.
So hang out with us as we play our first episode of Fluffy and Pete Survived the Zombie Apocalypse, a little radio sketch that we put together about two buddies who survived the zombie apocalypse. It's wonderful. David Walton does the narrator's voice, Michael Garrett does the voice of Fluffy, and I do Pete. It's something we'll be bringing to you in the future, something special for our extended Halloween episode tonight, going into 2 hours with new music, stories, and ghost stories, plus wonderful banter. And stay tuned as we bring back Montana Jordan when she told us the story of Saw Win a few seasons ago. She is wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show then, Montana, and your stuff is still just as wonderful today as we are moving in on Saw Win, which is the new year. So, we'll be going on for a bit. Hang out with us for Fluffy and Pete, plus another ghost story and some wonderful music on What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show, our special Halloween special, Episode 101, The Science of Monsters, on Para X Radio at 9 p.m. Friday nights. So, Phil, you have a happy Halloween.
You too. Happy Halloween.
I've got my pumpkin. We're going to make jack-o'-lanterns.
Nice.
I'm going to be at Mischief at the Mooter Friday for their Halloween party.
Oh,
I know.
I love the Mooter, as you can imagine. Yeah, we're also in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. And we'll have links up at the website at www.whatdoyoufraidofpodcast. This is our last episode for Halloween.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Can you believe that? And then we're in November.
Oh boy.
And they're calling for a nor'easter this weekend.
Indeed.
I know.
Can you believe that?
Nor'easter before Halloween, great.
All the better to cozy up with a little ghost story.
You're right. Absolutely.
Okay, well, I've been T. Fox Dunham.
And this is Phil Thomas.
Dean E. Howarth, the natural philosopher.
We will see you on episode 102 sometime in the near future on Parax Radio and at our website at www.whatdoyoufraidofpodcast.com. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Fluffy and Pete survive the zombie apocalypse. A radio play. Episode 1. Halloween in Zombieland. Hello there. My name is David Walton, and I welcome you to the first episode of What Are You Afraid Of's new audio series, Fluffy and Pete Survive the Zombie Apocalypse, written by T. Fox Dunham and Michael Garrett. During these episodes you will hear the stories of two best friends living in a world where the reanimated dead dominate the planet. Who am I in this story? Well, you can call me Supreme, Jehovah, the Big G, or the bum who lives in their basement and only comes up to teach the lads. When I'm not making sure the planets spin on or sharing wisdom with Fluffy and Pete, I dwell in their basement and compose folk songs. This has always been my dream. So, let's begin this story of friendship between the two lovable idiots who never should have survived a zombie epidemic. Fluffy and Pete survived the zombie apocalypse. Just a warning, since the show is free, refunds will only be granted in the most extreme cases and may be paid in munchies, zombie parts, or silly crayon doodles on stained napkins drawn by Pete. For those of you who are easily frustrated by stupidity and dumb luck, this show may cause high blood pressure, rapid heartbeat, and the clenching of fists, yelling in rage, and much gnashing at teeth. The staff at What Are You Afraid Of's Horror and Paranormal Show is not responsible for damage done to your phone, computer, or whatever device you're using to listen to the show. As T. Fox Dunham often comments, I would rather be lucky than smart. No zombies were harmed in the recording of this show. Plenty of authors were harmed, but they're used to it. Any similarities to persons living or dead is purely coincidental. This is a work of fiction, so please don't try any of this at home. Mimicking their actions probably won't get you hurt, but it will make you look dumb. We take you now to their Levittown rancher outside of Philadelphia. It's Fluffy's turn to check the various traps that keep the undead out, and Pete's turn to make breakfast. Morning has come at the end of the world in this devastated suburb, though if you've lived in Levittown, Pennsylvania, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Dead and rusting cars fill the highways. There is no longer any power or running water. The walking dead slowly roam the streets. These undead souls, once thriving, living and apathetic beings, search for the next meal of warm human flesh. And now, Fluffy and Pete survive the zombie apocalypse. A zombie apocalypse is a terrible fate, unless you're surviving it with your bestest mate. Even though corpses try to eat your thighs, at least you and your buddy can still get high. Fluffy and Pete survive the zombie apocalypse. Fluffy and Pete. Pete misses Halloween. On a beautiful October morning after the end of the world, well, it could be October. It's colder. The leaves are falling, but the lads haven't bothered keeping track of the days. What's the point? Online games no longer have a monthly fee. There's no electric bill, and you don't have to search the couch for change to hit the 7-Eleven for munchies anymore. What's the point of keeping track of what month it is? Anyway, on a beautiful autumn morning after the world ended, Fluffy went about his usual morning routine, collecting rainwater that had fallen in the night into the kiddie pool, and resetting the various traps outside the makeshift wall of their Levittown rancher.
Okay. Reload the ballista. Done. Check the spikes in the pits. Check. Oh, St. Celia nailed one with Mr. Smiley Clown.
Fluffy carefully approached the fallen clown statue he purloined from Smiley Clown Burgers, making sure the trap had sufficiently crushed the brain of the zombo. He hated zombos. They really bummed him out, especially when they tried to eat you and crap.
I hate zombos.
See, he does.
Especially when they try and eat me and crap. Okay, just have to put the statue back up on the spring trap. There we go. Should I clean this mess up? Nah. Pete, get your butt out here. Clean up on aisle hell.
What the hell, Fluffy? A downer better be eating you. I was having me a tinkle. Oh, I hate downers. They really bum me out.
Fluffy paused to wipe the rancid guts off his torn leather vest, then checked his wound-up pocket watch. He wore several pins with messages of revolution such as, "The state's not gonna smash itself," and, "At least zombies eat the rich." Pimples dotted his face, and he tried not to vomit from the sweet, salty stench of decay. The sunlight stung his bloodshot eyes, and he longed for a fresh cappuccino with no whip, an extra shot of espresso, and vanilla flavouring in a politically friendly paper cup.
Just come clean this guy up. Well, guy, I don't know, maybe could have been a lady? Can't really tell. Or maybe it wasn't trying to fit in with any narrow understanding of gender presentation. Point is, I just want everyone to know that I have no prejudice against zombies of any gender. I hate all zombies equally much.
Who are you talking to, man? It's just us and the Zimbibibos.
There's always someone judging. You know, I just don't want to be attacked on Twitter.
It is gone, dude. We got no juice or PlayStations, and no one cares about that crap anymore.
You know, people make that mistake all the time. Anyway, just clean this crap up. I'm gonna go wipe down Mr. Smiley Clown.
I hate that thing. Do you have to set it up so it's like watching me at night through my bedroom window?
Why, yes. Yes, I do.
Oh, and I should go in and get a shovel. We could save this dude for fertilizer. It'll be time to harvest soon.
Yes. Yes, go and fetch your shovel, my friend. Fetch it well. And while you are gone, I shall reset all the traps and destroy all our enemies. For soon my plans will be complete, and I shall dominate this world. All we will read shall be taboo, and all we shall watch will be foreign art house cinema. Under my rule, social injustice will be eliminated. All will follow my philosophy, or they shall pay for their fascist ways. For in this dead world I will rise and take my rightful place.
Fluffy? I am still here.
Oh, hey Pete, I wasn't saying anything.
Yes, you were. You were doing that thing when you sound like all crazy, all crazy-ass dictator dude, when you think I'm not around.
Well, then why are you still around? Why don't you have the shovel?
Guess I'm just feeling low. Swing low, sweet chariot. You know, like, that pretty low I had to sing there, but it's gonna be my first year missing Halloween. We got no costumes, we got no candy, and no spooky house to go see.
You know, Pete, that there are actual, literal zombies, right? What could be spookier than that? Though I will admit it's a shame that you have to go this year without a costume, or getting candy, or listening to your favorite scary paranormal podcast on Para X Radio on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Para X.
That was remarkably the thing where it's really certain of details, Fluffy.
Don't worry about it. Or Halloween, for that matter. You just go in the house and get the shovel. And if you start thinking about a costume, I'm sure we can make something out of the crap we find on our next supply run.
Okay, buddy. I'll go get the shovel.
Yes, and this will be the scariest and best Halloween you have ever known. And once I'm done, I will use my popularity to take over this dead world and finally bring social justice to the poor masses who have lingered.
Still here, Fluffy?
Oh, fuck me. Just get inside. Your stories will be on soon.
Oh, right. My stories. Today we're going to find out if Junebug Dinkelson is having triplets after her sultry and forbidden affair with Dr. Tungsten Overbite III, or whether the babies were implanted in her after she got taken up in that UFO.
You know, I don't want to ruin your show, but you realize that we don't have cable anymore, right? Or power, or running water, or, well, anything, really.
Well, sure, but it was awful writing anyway. I can't really tell the difference.
Alrighty then, will you just run along and play, Pete? I'll be in shortly.
Joy, 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 joy.
Oh, I can finally get back to work and have some peace and quiet. I think I'll hum a bit while I clean up this mess. I just hope one of the zombies hasn't slipped through our defenses and is now slowly stalking me in preparation to rip apart my neck with its broken teeth and gnaw on my gizzard. Oh well.
Little did Fluffy know, even after that oddly specific diatribe, which no one could have heard, that indeed one of the members of the incipient Walking Dead was at that moment finding its way through their defences, and was about to pounce on dear Fluffy as he picked out bits of the dead from their trap. Behind him, the soil of his mother's rose garden, now filled with dead and desiccated bushes, began to subside, parting way from the force of a tunnelling creature in its quest for food.
I sure hope something isn't trying to tunnel its way through my clever defenses. Impossible. Outrageous. I should just go back to humming. This is tedious work. Oh, but I got something to make it go a little smoother.
Having ignored the obvious signs of invasion through subterranean means, Fluffy recalled he had a special treat saved in his jacket pocket. Still oblivious to the digging threat, he took out a thin joint that he had forgotten about, lit it, and chilled out. It dulled his senses, making him more vulnerable to attack.
this is dulling my senses and making me more vulnerable to attack. But hey, those are the sacrifices we make for love.
The ground behind Fluffy opened up, and a creature pushed through, eyeing up Fluffy in the hopes of finding a meal. It crept slowly towards Fluffy, ready to take a bit out of him as he puffed like a smokestack.
Oh, wait. It's just a groundhog. Little bastard bit me. Come here, you little runt. Stay out of my mom's rose bushes. Whew. I'm just glad it wasn't a zombie.
And at that very moment, a little zombie boy fell from the sky as the bunch of helium balloons tied to his limbs finally lost their helium, dropping the undead monster child on their paw.
Why the hell are there still so many flying up there? Could it have been from the recent balloon convention at the Oaks Expo Center? No matter. I can't fight it off! It's gonna eat me!
Unable to fend off the zombie balloon boy, Fluffy gives in to his fate of becoming a member of the Walking Dead and inhaled his last miasma to ease the pain. He exhaled the lungful of smoke at the zombie boy, and to his surprise, the thing stopped attacking. A glaze came over the zombie eyes as the creature became docile, sleepy.
Holy Mary Jane, mother of stoners! It's high! Downers can still get high? It's just standing there. Okay, kid, I've always wanted to be an old man just so I could say this. Get the hell off my lawn!
The zombie balloon boy responded to Fluffy's orders and walked away, and was decapitated by the spinning axe trap.
Fluffy, I heard a skirmish. Did you just have a mortal battle with another flying zombie?
Yeah, thanks for saving me.
Oh, I'm your hero. Oh, that smells like good shit. Can I have something from your private stash, maybe?
No, sir. Don't you touch my stash. Some of that Ray Charles magic piano kush I got before the world went to hell. So good you'll go blind, my dealer promised me. So you'll just have to wait until the crop grows. And I measure it. So if I find anything missing from my stash, I'm going to tell you some spoilers about your soap opera.
Oh, fine. I'll be a good boy.
Good. Now are you making breakfast? Remember, that's the deal. I clean the trash today, and you make some breakfast. We'd have to use those eggs before they go bad. You know, I'm just glad zombie chickens still lay eggs.
Okay, Fluffy. But still feeling really down about Halloween. I just wish I could, trick or treat again, just once. I never knew last year would be the last time.
Oh, don't you fret, my unsuspecting roommate. For now, I have a devious plan that will eventually lead to Halloween holiday domination, and you will never know it's coming. I shall rule the holiday and be king of candy corn!
I'm still here, Fluffy. Again.
Okay. Let's just go watch your stories.
Out of sight, girlfriend. Fluffy and Pete survived the zombie apocalypse. We'll be right back on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show on Parax Radio on Friday nights at 9 p.m. and all major podcast services, unless it's a zombie apocalypse.
Rat, where are you going?
I'm going back to the Paranormal View, back where I belong.
Please, take me with you.
No, I'm through with everything here. I want to see if there's something left in life I haven't explored. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Rat, don't run to them. They talk about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs, and all kind of supernatural scary stuff.
You'll never understand, will you, Scarlet?
No!
Well, that's your misfortune.
Rat, if you go, where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear... Line!
You gotta be kidding.
That's the Paranormal View with your host, Henry Foister, Jeffrey Gould, and Barbara Duncan. Every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Parax Radio
What do
Network.
zombies want?
Brains.
What do they want? Oh, wait.
Your source for everything paranormal. Parax.
We now return to Fluffy and Pete survive the zombie apocalypse on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show.
And Pete. Fluffy and Pete spent the day doing their chores and trying not to get on each other's nerves. In the afternoon, Fluffy gathered some of his special stash, gathered up some acorns, old cereal marshmallows, and the last candy bar known to humankind that he'd been saving. He then climbed up on the roof and used a ladder to cross to a neighbour's house, making preparations for his Halloween surprise for his best friend. When he was finally ready and night had fallen, he came back to get his mate, Pete.
Hey, buddy. I know you've been down about Halloween. I wanted to cheer you up. It's Halloween tonight, and it's time to go trick-or-treating!
What now? Wait, what's going on?
Pete, did you, are you stoned?
What? No. Oh, man. Stoned? No, I'm just gonna go put on my costume for this year. I can't. Yippee dingleberries! I'm so excited!
Wait, that's your costume? All of the things in the world you could have been, and you go as a zombie. I see enough damn zombies every day.
How could I not? Look at this blood stain. This is actual zombie blood. This is the most realistic zombie costume ever.
Whatever. Just don't try to eat my brains, or my special brownies, or my ass.
What was that last one?
My brownies?
What?
And so Fluffy led Pete up to the roof, and together they climbed the ladder over to their neighbour's house. They kept quiet as the street had filled with zombies since the incident with the balloon boy. The neighbour's house was festively decorated. Fluffy had painted a basketball, like a jack-o'-lantern, and put up cheap paper decorations of vampires and ghosts that he'd found in his attic.
Oh boy! Should I knock on the door?
Hold on. Let me light up first. I found out a secret today. Pot chills out the Zimbos. You're gonna love this. You can actually train the living dead to do simple tasks when they're stoned. So all we have to do is blow smoke when they open the door, and we'll trick-or-treat this whole neighborhood, just like you wanted. Just let me get the joint lit. That's the important part.
Fluffy, good old Fluffernutter sandwiches. Did you just get that weed from your stash tonight?
Yeah, it's no problem. There's still plenty left. Okay, you ready? Say trick-or-treat!
Fluffy opened the front door, urging Pete to get his sack ready to receive treats. Pete hesitated and looked to Fluffy with a face like he was holding in bad diarrhea. The zombie, Mrs. Dinkins, their old neighbour, came to the door carrying a bowl of old cereal marshmallows and the last known candy bar on Earth. Fluffy smiled in anticipation of his friend's happiness.
Fluffy, I have something to tell you. Now, don't be mad, but I maybe kinda stole some of your stash and smoked it today.
No you didn't. I measured it. There was plenty of herb in the bag.
Yeah, about that. It is technically herb. It's mostly, well, as the British would say, oregano. I kinda switched it.
Pete, you simpleton. You dunce! You cacophonous buffoon! How did you even know where my stash was? I moved it out of my bowling shoe in the closet after the last time this happened.
Yeah, into the other bowling shoe. You just moved it back and forth.
Oh, wait, but that means Mrs. Dinkins is going to eat us!
Mrs. Dinkins dropped the bowl of treats and lunged after the boys, chomping at the air with her dentures and clawing. They both screamed and ran into the street and into the embrace of the mob of downers. Fluffy carried the joint of burning oregano, giving the autumn air a nice hint of spice.
Well, this looks like the end, old friend.
Sure does, my chum. Shall we go out as we planned to?
Dance party, death party? Already getting out my phone. Whew. Well, at least I get to die with my buddy while owning the dance floor.
Wait, they're not eating us. In fact, it looks like they're dancing too. It must be the oregano mixed with the pot. Who knew it would have had such a crazy and an incredulous, the thing where it's not believable effect? We can wait until they're really grooving it up and then, get away. Run, Fluffy! Phew. Oh, it was close. It feels good to be safely back inside in the house where we live, though I never really got to trick or treat.
Well, whose fault is that, Pete? You could have if you hadn't stolen my stash. I swear I'll never talk to you again.
Fine by me. You never let me have any fun. I hate you.
Hi, boys.
Hi, God.
I decided to pop upstairs and see what all the commotion was. I was getting a bit bored being down in the basement all the time. You see, when the apocalypse happened, I, your supreme being and creator of all things, decided to come to Earth as was foretold. Of course, due to an administrative oversight, damn that St. Peter, the zombie apocalypse had already happened, and all the people were gone. So I moved into their basement to spend some time thinking, and came upstairs at the end of their misadventure to spread some paternal advice. They were good lads, just a bit silly sometimes. So, what's all the bother, lads? You two fighting again?
Well, I tried to help Pete go trick-or-treating, and then he stole my secret stash and replaced it with oregano, as the British apparently say, and we were nearly eaten by the Zimbabweans. I shouldn't have even tried.
Me too. I don't want to think about Halloween again.
Oh, that's too bad, boys. Pete, you don't want to be mad at your friend Fluffy? He tried very hard to give you a fun Halloween experience. But did you really need to trick or treat? You're grown up now. You can still enjoy Halloween, but it's your turn to give out the candy. And you can read a scary book, like that incredible horror thriller out from the author T. Fox Dunham, Mercy, available at Amazon. Well, at least it was before the apocalypse. You can also watch scary films and visit a haunted house. As we grow older, we find new ways to enjoy our traditions and holidays, while letting the kiddies have their fun.
You're right, God, you're right.
And Fluffy, you should share with your friend. He's the only friend you've got. Things are most enjoyed when they're enjoyed with a mate, and I'm sure Pete appreciates that you tried tonight.
Yeah, God, I get it. Thank you.
Now, shall we have a little Halloween fun? Say trick or treat.
Trick or treat!
And with a snap of my fingers, candy rains from the ceiling.
Oh, you crazy. Hot damn in a dump truck.
Well, until next time on Fluffy and Pete Survive the Zombie Apocalypse. A zombie apocalypse is a terrible thing, unless you're surviving it with your bestest mate. Even though corpses try to eat your thighs, at least you and your buddy can still get high. Fluffy and Pete survive the zombie apocalypse. Fluffy and Pete think they made it through. Fluffy and Pete survive the zombie apocalypse. We've only got their word for it, let's hope that it's true.
So Katie, I want to tell you a story.
Yes, sir.
I'm 18 years old. One night I'm watching Deep Space Nine, and it's the great episode with the Cardassians, the Dias cast. I just spent a year suffering Lyme disease, and I'm going back to school in a week, and I just shaved my face. And 20 minutes later, I'm checking to make sure I got it all by my ear, and there is a golf ball there. A golf ball that was not there 20 minutes ago. 2 days later, my surgeon is cutting it out, and after 3 months and multiple tests, they determine that I have something called composite lymphoma. 9 other people in the world have had this, and they didn't even know how to treat it. So I go down to Philly, down to Penn, Hospital University of Pennsylvania, and it's amazing, a Scot like me, Dr. Giles McKenna, is there. He's the 3rd rated world's radiation oncologist. He dealt with a person in Africa, the 9th person who had it before me, and she died. Now he has a theory on how to cure it. He devises an intensive round of CHOP chemotherapy that's very detrimental, and then 5 months of radiation every day to my face, my cheeks, my chest, and my back. And every day for 5 months I went. And you know what? It wasn't the cancer that was killing me. It was the radiation, because they were burning me alive. And it's something that's been in my fiction, like my 2 most recent books, Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, is about a cancer patient who's dying, and Mercy, which is also about a cancer patient who's dying. And these are my 2 apotheoses. Now, September comes along, and I'm fighting it. October, I'm dying. October 10th or 11th, right around that weekend, I perform a Dungeons & Dragons game set in Ravenloft, the dark horror world, and it was created about these puppets, and I can't even lift my head off the table. That's how weak I was. That night, I go home, and I was completely bald at that point. They take me to the hospital, and I go in, and it was not intensive care, but I had an intensive care nurse, and I'm dying. For the next 2 weeks, I'm sitting in that hospital dying. And there was a time where I left, and they came running in with code blue and all that. I remember things. I remember the Summerland. I remember the green grass. I remember a fox guiding me. And there was a cave of lost children. There was a mountain of spirit. And then they brought me back, and I came back to this world. And it was a violent return. And from that point, I got better. I mean, that was the healing point, the tipping point. And after
I didn't know you had a near-death
No, I'm telling this to Phil for the first time. Hey, I'm sorry, Morticia.
Yes.
But then they released me, and you know what day it was? It was Halloween. It was Samhain.
No.
And I got out, and 3 of my friends came over. We didn't have any Halloween costumes, so we just kind of went around the house. Do you remember Adam Sandler when he was doing the Halloween stuff back on SNL? You're probably around the same age as me.
Yeah.
He's like,
love him.
He would stick his shirt up over his head and be like, "I'm crazy arm man."
Yeah.
I'm crazy arms. That's what we were doing. You know, like my friend was a maid, he had a vacuum cleaner. I did Morticia. I had the black mustache, and we would go around to the different apartments in my complex and get the candy, and then switch outfits. Like all of a sudden, I was maid, he was crazy arm man, and then we watched the Evil Dead.
Oh, nice! You watched the Evil Dead.
Evil Dead. Nice. But after that, I started work as a shaman.
Wow.
And I started having otherworld journeys once that doorway was open. And I became very sensitive to these things. And I left my name behind. And my name was Timothy. And I still go by T. Fox Dunham, but I became Fox.
Right.
Okay.
Because the spirit guide who brought me back.
That was what I was just going to ask you. That makes sense. That's really beautiful.
That was the question you were going to ask.
Yep, that's what I was going to ask. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you. The other question, I actually have 2 more questions. So,
well, why don't you tell us about Samhain first?
Okay. Oh, I get to talk about me first?
Yes, of course.
Okay, but don't let me forget, because I love that you shared that story with me, and that story could not be more intimate. So that you sharing that story with me and sharing that story with your listeners, that is an honor. Thank you for sharing something so deeply personal. And right there, you just described an extremely horrific and terrifying yet beautiful and wondrous spiritual journey. And that right there is the fundamental of paganism. So Samhain marked the beginning of the Old Celtic New Year, and it's also known as Harvest End, or the traditional end of harvest. So archaically, crops were gathered, and farmers would slaughter their weaker animals for meat for the upcoming winter. So according to Celtic tradition, Samhain was the night that the old god died, returning to the land of the dead to wait to be reborn at Yule, or Christmas, and the crone goddess would go into mourning for the loss of her son, leaving us in the temporary autumn and winter darkness. Samhain is a major holiday or Sabbath within paganism, and for me, like I already mentioned, it's like my Christmas. Samhain is the time of the year where Gaia, or Mother Earth, starts to preserve herself, and she starts to literally kill things off, like our harvest, or leaves on the tree, or weaker animals, and etc. And because Samhain is more or less archaically centered around darkness and death, it eventually became associated with then the afterlife and ghosts, or more specifically, communicating with spirits. So it's been understood that Samhain, or Halloween, is a natural period of time where communion and actual communication between the living and the dead is more prominent. But I call them the embodied or the disembodied because we know that they're not dead. So there are a few theories behind this as to why that metaphysical veil is the thinnest this time of the year, and I think it's because of this. With winter approaching, parts of the earth are dying off, and because we scientifically know that all matter is made up of energy, and it's been scientifically proven that energy can't be destroyed, there's essentially a lot of extra energy just floating around out there. And Gaia is going into self-preservation mode right now, so she and her natural elements are more vulnerable to making the call, talking to spirits, easier for them to answer. And I have seen that spirit communication is always possible during any time of the year, but it does seem that this time of the year is much more viable. So to back up, I was going to talk about the history of Samhain for a minute.
Let's go to one of your ghost stories first.
Ooh, okay.
And then we'll come back and you can tell us the history of Samhain on What Are You Afraid of now on Para X. So this is Ghost Hands, sent in by Katie Montana Jordan on What Are You Afraid?
Got no social weapon number. Lost his castle, his whole gothic team. He invested it wisely in a burner metal scheme. He's got some money, got it signed on, but he's serving this affliction. He's allergic to the sun now. Dole offers open time till 5 hours. He's gonna get his toe checked without paying for his life. But he's a vampire on the toe. He got outside when he's going for a stroll now. Vampire on the toe. It's a shock and it's taking its toll, y'all. Sustenance off the neck of some pure. Well, ain't that just the problem? You see, he doesn't wanna run the risk of catching hepatitis B. So he's sleeping by day, living by night. He's got a hunger in his stomach and some bruising on his pride. Prince of Darkness, welfare check, bureaucracy and all some landlords breathing down his neck when you're a vampire on the door. He got outside when he's going for a stroll now. Vampire on the door. Decades of culture shock is taking its toll. TVs when he gets his job working for the HSE, so now he's not working, blood on tap, earning big bucks per night, but day he takes a nap, so soft money, blood for free, now is anywhere for a vampire to be. Outside when he's going for a stroll now. It's a shock and it's taking its toll. He's waking up a brawl, yo.
Music credits and rights for episode 101. Vampires Suck, Zombies Rule by Astrometrics. Vampire on the Dole by Violins is Not the Answer, and Japanese Ghost by Tan Lo, all songs used under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Appropriate credit given to the performers. So that's the What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show special episode 101, The Science of Monsters. Yes, we are 101 episodes into Season 3, and it's just been an incredible journey so far. And as you know, this is a special time for me at Samhain as I continue to survive cancer and build a life, and it's been an incredible journey. We'll be returning for Season 4 with some new content, new ghost stories, new paranormal authors, new horror fiction, new music, and Fluffy and Pete Survive the Zombie Apocalypse, our little zombie sketch comedy that we'll be doing on future episodes. We've been named number 12 on BuzzFeed's Best Horror Podcast out of thousands, and we are now over 150,000 downloads, and I want to thank everybody who's helped us all these years as we put together this wonderful community. And the show is just incredible because it's allowed me to reach out and meet new people that have become a wonderful part of my world. And we couldn't have done this episode and the month of October without wonderful contributing creative people. We had Andrew Fuller, Horror Baker, on Food Network's Halloween Baking Championship. Of course, Michael Garrett has been with me all month, like it down at Fort Mifflin, up here playing D&D and helping me with Fluffy and Pete. Thank you, Fort Mifflin, for holding our horror reading. Also, Kevin Hamadani, director of Zombies of Mass Destruction. Dean Howarth, living history expert. Phil Thomas, my Sancho, my companion. My left side mic guy. Rebecca Brumble at Para X Radio and her husband Eric. Of course, Montana Jordan for that wonderful bit on Samhain. Sounds like we'll be hearing from her again around Christmas time, as she and Krampus are not having the best time at the moment. Our amazing, wonderful, talented, giving, patient David Walton, our British folk singer and voice actor. David, thank you so much for everything you've done. Tim McLean, who sent us in that lovely ghost story about his EVP experiments. Cindy Herman, my D&D friend, my player, for getting us free passes again to Penhurst Asylum. Of course, Bill Reap of Reap Investigations, and Paul Dixon and Chris Reap, also of Reap Investigations. Wonderful talents, great paranormal warriors. We'll be talking to them again. P.D. Casack, winner of the Bram Stoker Award in World Fantasy. She has been incredible, and she will be back on the show soon, especially for Women's Month in Horror. And then my wife, Allison Ledbetter, who's always been supportive, always looked the other way when I've spent money on graphics, always been there to get me where I needed to go, working out her schooling and job. Hun, I couldn't have done this without you, and you make Samhain so special, because I did survive, and we're together, and we've got an amazing future. Well, from all the folks at What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show, we all want you to have a wonderful Halloween. Stay safe, keep your spooky on, keep it in your heart all year. It's time for the witches, the ghouls, the goblins to dance. Happy Samhain and happy Halloween.
Japanese ghosts are walking by me. Japanese ghosts with their head in their hands, but the whole of their minds has hurted all it could. They must be the followers, but I am way ahead. Japanese ghosts are whispering their hate. Japanese ghosts are begging me to stay, but the hollow of their minds takes the arguing to a halt. If there's faith in this world, I will find a place to stay. I will find a place to stay, but time just won't smother me. I will make you pay. I will make you pay. Fuck the high school times, fuck the spectrum games, fuck the role-playing games, fuck your moral key, fuck your abstract love. But life is but an instant, and problems simplify. Japanese ghosts are walking by me. Japanese ghosts with their head in their hands, but the hollow in their minds takes the arguing to a halt. If there's faith in this world, I will find a place to stay.
Using your jugular vein as refreshment.
T. Fox Dunham lives in Philadelphia with his wife Allison. He's a lymphoma survivor, cancer patient, modern bard, and historian. His first book, The Street Martyr, was published by Gutter Books. A major motion picture based on the book is being produced by Throughline Films. Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, a book about what it's like to be dying of cancer, was recently released from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Fox has a story in the next Stargate anthology from MGM and Fandemonium Books, Points of Origin. Fox is an active member of the Horror Writers Association, and he's had published hundreds of short stories and articles. His motto is Wrecking Civilization, one story at a time.
Phil Thomas is an author and screenwriter from the suburbs of Philadelphia. His screenplays have been produced into feature films False Face and Always from Darkness, and are available in major retailers such as Best Buy and Target, as well as availability on Netflix and Amazon On Demand. His short films can be viewed on his YouTube channel, Film Zero Presents. He is a member of the International Association of Professional Writers and Editors, and he currently writes for Cultured Vultures, Game Skinny, and BloodyDisgusting.com. His first novel, The Poe Predicament, is being published in 2018 by Caliburn Press.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.